The Vidal Speaks podcast.
Getting back to the detoxification, one thing I've got to stress that I can't say enough is you have to start slow. It's a marathon. It's not a race. When many of my clients do not sweat, and they come into, they're toxic. They've got a variety of different problems. Sometimes it's kidney problems. Sometimes it's aches and pains. Sometimes it's insomnia. Sometimes it's immune system disorders. And the list goes on. And sometimes it's first stage cancers. The deal is and they don't sweat. I said, you need to get into sweat therapies. That's one of the first things. Kickstart the body and dumping, get the body's natural detox processes going rather than, depending on a chemical agent to chelate stuff. Get the body going, get the body started and getting rid of the trash. But they tell me flat out, look, I don't sweat. And I said, well, you need to get out there. No, I walk, I do this, I don't sweat. The bottom line is, you don't sweat, try taking a little bit of green tea. Try taking a little bit of cayenne pepper. Natural anti-inflammatories, which are good for you, for somebody who's mercury toxic. And you get out there in the heat and you're properly hydrated, a magical thing is going to happen. You're going to sweat. Now you're going to start sweating. Maybe you have a little bit of sweat on your arm, or you have, some sweat on your chest and so on. And, oh, hey, I'm sweating. After a time, the body becomes acclimated to sweating. And lo and behold, it won't be long. Weeks, months later, your whole body is soaking with sweat. And this begins the true process of detoxification. Now, while you're doing that, you're doing your hair test, you're fulfilling your requirements of your mineral deficiencies, you're engaging in liposomal vitamin C, which is protecting you from the oxidation, which is an anti-cancer. It's producing glutathione. It's boosting the immune system. It's healing arteries, because that's what it does. You're doing all that. It is a process, a natural process. I mean, all these things are in your body anyway. It's a natural process that kickstarts the detoxification mechanisms. And I have never heard anybody coming back to me saying, oh, dear God, I can't get out of bed. Oh, like Dr. Grishay would say, oh, I can't open my eyes because I engaged too much of the chelation therapies. I think the way to go is, and this is from years and years of research, reading thousands of books. There's a 2 rooms next to me full of books and research papers because I'm type A and I had to figure everything out because I was just so into this. I couldn't stop. It was like going down the rabbit hole. I could not stop until I was done. One day I was done. But this method of engaging sweat therapies, of boosting the body's own natural compounds that it makes to get rid of this thing, inciting the body to begin the natural protocols, I find that people really don't get these detox, they used to call them Herxheimer reactions. I find that they feel better after a time. I detoxed one kid who was suffering from multiple sclerosis symptoms. He's 25 years old, for God's sake. I didn't know where he got the heavy metals, but getting a hair test, he had a lot of cadmium, and he had some mercury, and he had horrible mineral deficiencies, and oh God, sodium, potassium off the chart, and he felt terrible. But in 3-4 months' time, by doing all this stuff, he was able to reduce those symptoms where he had headaches and muscle pain and heart arrhythmias and all that stuff. He's able to get over all this stuff, and he goes about his way. And one day he comes into my clinic and he says, look, I don't have any more symptoms. And I said to him, look, you're healed. I don't want to see you anymore. Get out of here. Go live your life.
So that's interesting. I would like to ask you, what laboratory do you use for your hair test?
Yeah, I don't recommend any one or the other. I think they're all pretty good. We use Trace Elements of Texas. I've had some issues with them not doing things fast or efficient enough, but we sorted it out. It's $50. I like the report. It's very adequate. Look, you don't need those exact numbers. You don't need, I'm 0.93735. Nah, you don't need that. What you need to know is the trends. I want to know what's going on there, what's low. Typically, a lot of the times, there'll be one mineral that's super low. And when these people take that mineral, a lot of things come right with metabolism. A lot of the times it's low magnesium because magnesium is the first thing that's dumped. A lot of the times it's calcium, but not all the time. Calcium is low in the body, and calcium is so important for cell membrane function that you can't function without it. Sometimes it's the classic zinc. Zinc is, part of metallothioneins. It's part of the chelation process in the kidney. If you supplement with a lot of zinc, I do. I take 50 milligrams. I also take 2 milligrams of copper. When you're banging those zincs every day, it's driving down the copper because they're antagonistic. You should take a little bit of copper as well. Copper is super, super important as well. They're both super important. They both work together. They're kind of antagonistic on the mineral chart. So I always recommend you take those. But magical things happen when you're going about promoting the body's own natural therapies. One of the things I want to talk about, going through the process of reading all this stuff and writing articles and treating people and doing podcasts, I've just hammered on this stuff for years and years, and I figured some things out. There are the three really theories where people really get sick from chronic disease. One we've already hammered: mineral deficiencies in hair tests.
Yeah.
Nearly every single person that I send out for a hair test that's really sick is gonna come back mineral deficient, too many minerals, what we call deranged mineral transport, and they're gonna have heavy metals. One guy out of 100 back, and he didn't have it because he wasn't sick. He came in for a scan and a treatment and said, I just want to look at stuff. What do you got? And I said, we can do a hair test. We can run scans and treatments. A lot of different things we can do. So I did this thing, and I couldn't find anything wrong with them. I said, get out of here. There's something wrong with you. I don't want to see you. We can talk on the phone, whatever. Come on, get out of here. So that was the one person. Every other person, and I've seen uranium and mercury and lead and cadmium, arsenic. Right now I've got arsenic and aluminum coming out of me still because I'm a 4-methylator and my liver's been damaged by mercury. And so I'm going through this another process of probably 6 months to get rid of the junk. So one thing is mineral deficiency caused by heavy metals. I didn't know that. I had to figure that out.
Yeah.
Number 2 is the breakdown of the cell membranes. This is from Oxidized Oils. When you're banging those oils that you get from the Price Mart or wherever, Costco or whatever, you buy the gallon oils that are sitting on the counter and you're frying your foods, which is bad for you. All of those oxidized oils contain things like acrylamides and all this nasty stuff. It's a super inflammatory food product. Don't do it. So that's another thing. You got to change your diet.
Yeah.
You've got to get rid of all the inflammatory foods, which means no GMOs, which means no processed oils, which means no fried foods, which means low in gluten, which means an anti-inflammatory diet consisting of things like more herbs and chia flaxseed. The plant oils help to rebuild cell membranes, such as the hemp oil and the flaxseed oil. These are part of cancer therapies because they're so good at rebuilding cell membranes.
Right.
The second theory of why you get chronically ill is your cell membranes are screwed because you're eating all this these horrible fats and these horrible oils. Your body's taking the oils and making bad cell membranes, so they're not communicating. Cells aren't communicating. That's one of the theories of disease. So rebuild your cell membranes by eating good fats. The good fats are classically plant oils for other people that aren't vegetarians or vegans and so on. There's, eggs, chicken eggs. You'll hear a lot of people engaging in eating those because they're a good source of fats and proteins. Sometimes you get into fish oils or the omega-3s. Omega-3s are always coming from your plants. The plants make the omega-3s. And so when you have fish eating those plants, you're basically eating a fish that's high in omega-3. The other thing, when we talk about anti-inflammatory foods, you need to watch and be careful with high oxalate foods. When plants are grown on soils that contain a lot of aluminum, and we'll just touch on this briefly, they contain a lot of oxalates. The 3 oxalate foods: buckwheat, spinach, rhubarb. There are some others. But these particular foods grown on soils that contain aluminum contain so much oxalate because the plant uses oxalate to bind the aluminum, and sometimes it pushes out into the soil. Sometimes it pushes it into the leaves. Sometimes you don't eat it. But the plant still has a lot of oxalate, and it's very, very inflammatory. Now, if you're already inflamed from mercury and you're not making glutathione, okay, and I think women make more glutathione than men, so men tend to be more mercury toxic, and that's part of the deal. That's just the way we're made. It's important to be careful of those inflammatory foods. So you're not banging them processed foods, which contain a lot of, there's something like 24 milligrams of aluminum you're going to get every day from your processed foods. And the oxidized oils and some of these inflammatory foods, which contains the oxalates. One of the things we haven't touched upon, but we should, is when you have 2 heavy metals, and there's always a couple of heavy metals. It's never just, well, looky, I've got mercury and that's it. look, if you're sequestering mercury into your tissues and you're not getting rid of mercury, chances are you're not getting rid of those other heavy metals. And you're always taking aluminum if you're eating processed foods. It's in the water, it's in the food, it's in the air. If you believe in chemtrails, I won't get into that. That's a whole nother deal. But when you have mercury and you have another metal, and there's 2 or 3 metals, and it's always 2 or 3, never 1, according to everything I'm looking at with these hair tests, there's a synergistic reaction between the metals, which creates more of an inflammatory condition, which creates more of a neural destructive process, the sum of those 2 metals. So when you have 2 metals together, it creates more of a problem than if you just had 1, or if you could just consider the sum of those 2 metals. Has that been your experience? You're familiar with this?
Well, in all the years I did hair tests, for sure, aluminum was high in everybody I tested. Everybody. Oh, yeah. I mean, unbelievable, shockingly high. Mercury I used ARL Labs. And it will look like, oh, the person will go, that's good, my mercury is low. But it's not really, because the lowest bar is still like really toxic. So when you see someone that's got a line that's a 1/2 inch long, that's like super toxic. But mercury, so it depends on which lab you're using. But I definitely found mercury and aluminum were by far the 2. Then I had certain patients that had nickel. A lot. And what was really interesting about the nickel, and I think it's Gerson, but they talk about this as like a cancer causing metal.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
And interesting, many times it was like what we're talking about. They would start with what I would say they had a nickel toxicity. Then you start taking the minerals. And man, I saw nickel on some people's go off the chart, like unbelievable amount of nickel coming out. Some people, I saw manganese come out of a lot of people, but not usually in the start. And I could never figure that out. One guy, he did a lot of like his business was something to do with guns. So I wondered if it was something to do with ammunition or something, because he worked on this range. But he had a gigantic amount of manganese. But usually, by far, it's aluminum and mercury that you see that's so gigantic.